first thing you need to understand about the angels in the Bible is that they have nothing to do with the chubby babies with white wings that show up in church paintings or tattoos. That image was invented much later, during the Renaissance, when European artists decided that the sacred needed to be beautiful and comfortable. But the original texts, written thousands of years ago in Hebrew and Greek, described creatures that made people fall face first on the ground out of pure terror. It wasn't fear born of respect or admiration. It was a kind of fear that paralyzes, that makes you feel like you're facing something that shouldn't exist, something that breaks all the rules of what the human brain can process as real. When you read the biblical accounts without the filter of modern culture, you notice that almost every time an angel appears to someone, the first thing it says is, "Fear not," or "Do not be afraid." This isn't a polite greeting. It's an emergency command, because the person seeing this is going into panic mode. In the book of Daniel, when the prophet has a vision of an angel, he describes a being with a body shining like precious stone, arms and legs that look like polished metal, eyes like torches of fire, and a voice that sounded like the roar of a crowd. Daniel says that upon seeing this, all strength left him. The color drained from his face, and he fainted. The men who were with him ran away without even seeing the angel, just feeling the presence. This isn't a scene of peaceful mystical encounter. It's a description of pure horror. The seraphim, which appear in the book of Isaiah, are described as creatures with 6 wings. 2 wings cover the face, 2 cover the feet, and only 2 were used for flying. They hovered above God's throne screaming, "Holy, holy, holy," without stopping, and their voices were so powerful they made the doorpost shake and filled the temple with smoke. When Isaiah saw this, his first reaction wasn't peace or joy. He said, "Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips." He felt he was going to die just from being in the presence of that thing. One of the seraphim had to take a burning coal from the altar with tongs and touch Isaiah's mouth to purify him, because he couldn't even function properly after what he had seen. The cherubim are even stranger. The popular version shows them as cute little angels, but the Bible describes something else. In the book of Ezekiel, the cherubim appear as creatures with 4 faces, one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle. They had 4 wings, and underneath the wings were human hands. Their legs were straight, and their feet looked like calves' hooves, gleaming like polished bronze. But the detail that makes everything more disturbing is that they were covered with eyes. Not just the body, but the very wheels that move along with them were full of eyes all around. Imagine seeing this suddenly. It's not an image that calms you. It's an image that breaks your notion of what a living being should be. The human brain uses patterns to understand the world. When you see something with 4 faces, wings, human hands, hooves, and eyes all over, your brain has no file to process this. The natural reaction is intense fear. The thrones, or ophanim, are described in Ezekiel as wheels within wheels, full of eyes that move in any direction without needing to turn. They accompanied the cherubim, and when the cherubim rose, the wheels rose with them. When they stopped, the wheels stopped. Ezekiel says that the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. There's no clear explanation of what this means, but the image is of something mechanical and organic at the same time, something that doesn't follow the laws of physics we know. It's the kind of thing you'd see and think you were going insane. Now, why does this matter today? Why should someone in 2026 care about ancient descriptions of bizarre creatures? The answer lies in what these descriptions reveal about how human beings deal with the incomprehensible. When you encounter something you can't categorize, that doesn't fit into any mental box you have, the brain enters maximum alert mode. It's the same feeling you get when you wake up in the middle of the night and hear a strange noise in the house. It's not necessarily a loud or dangerous noise, but it's a noise you don't recognize, and that lights up all the internal alarms. Fear of the unknown is one of the most primitive emotions that exist. It served to keep our ancestors alive when they encountered something new in the forest that could be a predator. Biblical angels were designed, or at least described, in a way that maximized this reaction. They weren't made to be understood. They were made to be impossible. And this created a giant distance between the human and the divine. The implicit message was, you can't understand this, you can't control this, you can only submit to it. In an era when people believed that knowing the name of something or understanding its form gave power over it, Creating beings that couldn't be comprehended was a way of establishing absolute hierarchy. This psychological mechanism hasn't disappeared. Today, people don't see six-winged angels with eyes all over, but they deal with the same kind of anxiety when facing the incomprehensible. The difference is that the incomprehensible has changed form. Now it's the amount of information arriving every day. It's the algorithms that decide what you see without you understanding how they work. It's the feeling that there's a giant system operating in the background of everything, and you have no idea how it really functions. When someone tries to explain how artificial intelligence really works, not the simplified version, but the actual technical process, most people feel that same discomfort. It's too much information. It's too complex. It doesn't fit into the mental categories we use to live day to day. The modern reaction is similar to the ancient one. People either panic and start seeing everything as conspiracy, or they simply shut down and decide not to think about it. It's easier to believe in a simplified version, even if it's wrong, than to deal with a real version that's complicated and scary. This is what happened with angels too. People took these terrifying descriptions and turned them into babies with wings because it was easier to process, more comfortable to have in your head. Fear was replaced with cuteness. But there's another angle to this story that connects directly with modern human behavior. Biblical angels didn't appear randomly. They always had a message, a task, an order. They were messengers. The word angel comes from the Greek angelos, which means exactly that, messenger. And the way they presented themselves had everything to do with the authority of the message. If an ordinary guy showed up and said, "God told you to do this," the person who questioned it could doubt. But if an impossible creature, covered with eyes, with multiple faces and wings of fire appeared and said the same thing, there was no discussion. The form guaranteed that the message would be taken seriously. Today, we live in a world where everyone can send messages to everyone, where any person can declare themselves an expert or authority. But precisely because of this, it's increasingly difficult to know who to trust. People look for signs of authority, something that says this message is important, you need to pay attention. In the past, it was a terrifying appearance of the messenger. Today, it's other signs: number of followers, verification badge, expensive visual production, deep and serious tone of voice, use of technical words. These are modern ways of creating the same feeling of, this here is serious. You should worry about this. The mechanism changed form, but the function is the same. And there's the issue of fear not repeated in almost every angelic appearance. This wasn't just a way to calm the person down. It was an acknowledgement that the natural reaction to the sacred, to the powerful, to the truly other is terror. Ancient religions understood this. They didn't try to make the divine seem friendly. They maintained the distance, maintained the fear, because fear generates respect and obedience. Only later, when initial contact was made, came the message of comfort. First you break the person with fear, then you offer relief. It's a psychological pattern that works. This pattern appears in many places today. Think about how certain types of discourse that move people work. First, you show the danger, the giant problem, the crisis that's coming. You make the person feel real fear, that kind of fear that paralyzes. Then, you offer the solution, the path, the protection. It doesn't matter if it's religious discourse, political, or sales. The structure is the same, terror followed by relief. And it works because it touches something very deep in how the human brain processes threats and security. Biblical angels also had another important function. They were proof that there was something beyond the visible world. In an era without modern science, without a way to explain much of what happened in nature, these visions served as confirmation that the universe was more complex than it seemed. Today, science explains most natural phenomena, but even so, people look for signs that there's something more. It could be in mystical experiences. It could be in conspiracy theories. It could be in the feeling that certain events have special meaning. Human beings have difficulty accepting that things simply happen without greater reason. We want pattern. We want meaning. We want to feel that there's a hidden layer behind ordinary reality. The detailed descriptions of angels with all those eyes, wings, wheels, and faces serve to create concrete mythology. It wasn't vague. It wasn't just a spiritual presence. It was visual. It was specific. You could imagine it even though it was impossible to fully comprehend. This made the religious experience more real for people. The more detail, the more the mind accepts as possible. If someone says, "I saw a spirit," you might think it was imagination. But if the person says, "I saw a creature with 4 faces, straight legs, bronze feet, covered with eyes, with wheels that spun in all directions at the same time," the level of detail makes it seem like it really happened. This principle works today in any story that people want to be believed. The more specific detail, the more real it seems. That's why invented testimonies usually have very specific details about clothes, times, colors. The brain associates detail with truth. Biblical descriptions of angels use this same technique, consciously or unconsciously. They weren't vague. They were extremely detailed, and this gave weight to the experience. There's also the fact that angels never appear asking for anything for themselves. They're always in service of a larger message. They don't have their own will, at least not in the biblical accounts where they appear to humans. They're tools, they're instruments. And this is important because it establishes that you can't negotiate with them, you can't make a deal. They don't want anything from you. They just deliver the message or fulfill the task. This makes everything more impersonal and scarier. If it were a being that wanted something, you could try to offer something else, try to negotiate. But there's no negotiation with a messenger who has no self-interest. You can only accept or reject the message. This idea of impersonal systems that operate without considering what you want is something people face all the time today. You can try to negotiate with a person, but you can't negotiate with a system. If you owe money to the bank, you can try to talk to the manager and explain the situation. But the automatic collection system doesn't care about your situation. It just executes what was programmed. If you're banned from a social network, you can try to appeal, but in practice you're dealing with an algorithm that has no empathy, no individual consideration. It's the same feeling of being before something that can't be influenced by human arguments. It's impersonal, it's inevitable, and therefore it's scary. Biblical angels were exactly that. They were the personification of forces that didn't care what you thought or wanted. They brought the message or executed the order, and that was it. There was no room for persuasion. And people reacted with terror because they understood, even without rationalizing, that they were facing something that couldn't be manipulated or controlled. In a world where almost everything can be negotiated, influenced, or changed, encountering something truly inflexible is terrifying. The transformation of these terrifying creatures into cute and comforting symbols says a lot about how societies deal with what's difficult to face. Instead of accepting that the sacred or the unknown or the powerful is scary and uncontrollable, people prefer to redraw the narrative into something more manageable. It's the same process that happens with anything that generates anxiety. If reality is too harsh, you create a softer alternative version and live in it. It's not conscious lying. It's a defense mechanism. The brain does this automatically when it's overloaded. But the problem with softening everything is that you lose the original impact of the message. The angels were scary for a reason. They represented something that was completely outside human control, something that couldn't be domesticated or turned into a mascot. When you turn that into a fat baby with little wings, you lose all the force of the concept. What was supposed to generate deep respect becomes church decoration, and then the central message is lost. This happens with many ancient concepts when they arrive in modernity. The shell is taken, the superficial image, and the core that made important is thrown away. People use symbols from ancient traditions as tattoos, as logos, as t-shirt prints, without the slightest idea what that originally meant. And it's not moral criticism. It's just the observation that meaning dilutes over time. What was supposed to be terrifying becomes cute. What was supposed to be serious becomes a meme. Biblical angels, in their original form, were reminders that human beings are limited. You can't understand everything. You can't control everything. There are things bigger than you, more complex than you, and they don't care what you think. This is a difficult message to swallow for a culture that sells the idea that you can be whatever you want, do whatever you want, understand whatever you want if you try hard enough. The modern vision is of infinite expansion of individual power. But angels were exactly the opposite of that. They were the affirmation of limit, of boundary, of this far and no further. Today, People have difficulty with limits. They want answers for everything, control over everything, understanding of everything. And when they encounter something they really can't control or understand, they go into crisis. It could be the death of someone close. It could be an incurable disease. It could be a system too complex to be mastered. The reaction is similar to the ancient reaction before the angel: panic, paralysis, feeling of powerlessness. And then either the person accepts the limit, or they create an alternative narrative where they still have control. They create conspiracy theory, create magical explanation, create external culprit. Anything to avoid having to accept that some things are simply beyond human reach. Biblical angels left no room for this. They were living proof that you weren't in control. And maybe that's why modern versions were softened. Because keeping the original version would be keeping alive a discomfort that most people don't want to feel. It's easier to believe in beautiful and protective guardian angels than in impossible creatures that appear screaming, "Fear not," because you're obviously in panic. The final point is that these ancient descriptions weren't random. They served a very clear psychological and social purpose. They created hierarchy, established authority, generated respect through fear, and reminded people that there were forces beyond human comprehension. Today, these same psychological mechanisms continue to operate, just with different guises. People still react with fear to the incomprehensible, still look for authority in symbols of power, still try to soften what's too hard to face. The form change, but the function is the same. And understanding this doesn't make the world less complicated, but at least it makes the patterns more visible. You start to notice when you're being manipulated by the same type of mechanism that worked thousands of years ago, and that gives you at least a chance to choose how to react instead of just reacting on autopilot.